Welcome back, everyone, to the European VC podcast. Today, I have Mikael Johnsson, founding partner of Oxx. Oxx is now on Fund 2, $190 million fund. They're focused on B2B SaaS across Europe, and they have 6 people based in Stockholm and 9 in London. They've invested in notable companies like Funnel Gravity and SOC Radar, as well as many others. In this conversation, we cover a lot of ground. We're covering everything from the sustainable competitive advantage in B2B SaaS to the current state of VC and why Mikael believes that we will have a wipeout in the number of seed funds in Europe. And of course, we also dive into the sweet spot of Oxx, which is investing between Series A and Series B. Hope you'll enjoy this episode as much as I did making it.
Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. This episode comes to you by the support of our partners, Portfolio IQ by Synaptic. Portfolio IQ is the most effective way to track your portfolio. It pulls data from all sources, board decks, financials, MIS sheets, forms, emails, everything, and creates a true single source of truth for your portfolio data. With Portfolio IQ, you can track all the metrics that matter, not just the standard metrics. All metrics are reviewed by a team of certified accountants. You'll get 100% accuracy. Not sure about a number? Just click on it to see the exact cell in the document it came from. Portfolio IQ also adds a layer of standardization to make the data comparable and useful for benchmarking, valuations, and reporting. All of this is as simple as forwarding an email. Zero added work for your fund or your portfolio companies. Portfolio monitoring that you'll fall in love with. Go to synaptic.com/portfolio IQ. That's synaptic.com/portfolio IQ. The good folks at Synaptic will be happy to give you a no-cost trial.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
United and determined, we can serve as a model for other regions of the world.
The nature of a problem requires a European response.
Europe is a story of new beginnings.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Mikael, welcome to the European VC podcast.
Thanks very much, Andreas. Great to be here.
I've been looking forward to this conversation. We just featured another piece by one of your colleagues on the European VC website on our Insights section, our Insights platform, as we call it, where we're sourcing input from the community. And I really think it's something that's working well. And it was picked up very well. I had quite a couple of people reaching out saying, I learned something there. So that's is not great. What we're going to talk about here today, but we are going to talk about how you got into venture and building Oxx.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I've been at this for now pretty much 25 years by now. And it's been a long road. When I started in venture back in the 2000s, we were in the middle of the dot-com boom and bust. And I was quite fascinated by what was happening at the time with all these new companies coming up with innovative products and business models and getting funded and growing very quickly and everything. So I figured that I wanted to be an entrepreneur and build some of that stuff because that sounded really cool and that got me excited. So started working for a venture capital firm with the idea that that is a really good way to see a lot of different companies and seeing what works and learning what are the mistakes that people make and what are the good things people are doing in order to be successful. So I thought I'd give it 3 years. So this was in 2000. And then I was going to go out and run my own company. Here I am 25 years later, still on that same side of the table, on the investor side of the table. I'm running my own firm now, though, together with my co-founder, Richard, obviously. So maybe, all roads lead to Rome after all. I don't know, but it's been a long and winding road for sure.
What made you stay in venture, would you say? Why stay on this side of the table instead of the founder side?
Couple of things. First and foremost, if you are, as I am, primarily motivated by intellectual curiosity, I don't think there's any better job in the world, at least not from my vantage point.
Yeah. Well, I learned something. A podcaster talking to all the VCs in the world.
I still, 25 years in and at 52 years of age, learn something new every day. Yeah. I think that's what keeps me so excited. And
I think that's the difference between a VC and a podcaster, because I just talk to you, but I don't really make it to internalize it because I don't have to do anything else with it than just have fun with the conversation. So that's probably just me being less smart.
So I think that it really tickles the sort of intellectual curiosity side of me. I think what I've come to understand about myself is also that I am a person who wants to build. I'm not a manager or someone who just like takes care of stuff. Like I want to be part of building stuff, seeing things go from nothing to something, and maybe planting that seed and watering that seed and seeing it grow into a beautiful plant or tree or whatever. There's just something philosophically that resonates with me about being part of that and the excitement of really seeing it happen. And obviously, once you've sort of caught that drug, it's really hard to kick the habit. So I think that's also I still to this day continue to be excited coming out of meeting with new entrepreneurs with great product visions and ideas, and I get a kick out of that. So it's that side of it as well. And I think the third thing is I'm just damn stubborn. I refuse to declare defeat. It's like there's been so many paths on this journey where I could just hang up my boots and say, no, that's it. I'm going to go into consulting, banking, whatever, right? Or, taking a regular job as a manager or something like that. But I'm just very, very stubborn.
Fuck life as a manager. That's not good. I've been there. Never going back. I've done everything I could to not have any hires inside EUVC. Now we've brought on 2. And I thought I had a full day of working this morning, but it ended up being 4 hours of onboarding.
No, I mean, it's a part of it. Like, so obviously I've been investing for 25 years. Do I get a kick out of making another investment? As I say, I'm excited by talking to founders, by new propositions, seeing companies develop, but like the process of making another investment and stuff, that doesn't really make me excited anymore. But building a team, as we're doing now at Oxx, and being a manager, I guess, but probably hopefully more of a leader. That's sort of the next phase for me, right? And that's also exciting. But I do see your point of your degrees of freedom. They reduce pretty quickly once you start having employees. Yes,
absolutely. All right, now I want to ask you about a pivotal moment in your life. Or is there anything that comes to mind when I ask you some moment that has really changed how you thought about the life going forward from that?
Yeah, I think, coming back to how I started my career in venture, like I started in the really heights. Well, actually, when I signed my contract to get into this line of business, that was in March of 2000. That was exactly the day NASDAQ peaked at that time. And then as I started my job, we'd already gone into a correction, which lasted for 3 or 4 years. So it's all downhill from there. So I had very formative experience as an investor, where I came into a situation where there had been tons of overinvestment. There were just casualties by the roadside everywhere, just dead corpses of companies and investment funds and everything. So I very quickly learned that being an investor is not about necessarily, making an investment in a company. It's about building great companies and being able to exit those companies at some point in time. And it's damn difficult. So I think that has probably, that has definitely colored me as an investor in terms of a mindset and how I think about things. Like, it's not just about deployment, and getting into the, hottest, sexiest companies. Like, you have to do all the oftentimes, boring, tedious work to just get there in the end. And the cycles are so incredibly long in venture.
How would you say then that because this is something that I've just been scribbling a bit on, and it's this DPI creation mindset from day one, so to say, and also from how you construct your portfolio model and think about when do you make the big bets, when do you make the shorter term bets, all those things.
Yeah.
How would you say that is then your mindset, your thinking, the processes that you do affected by this increased focus on DPI creation from day one?
I think it's inherent in the DNA of our firm and in the strategy that we pursue. So traditional venture get in early, you absolutely need to get into the, one or two generational companies. You invest in 30, 40 real options. You obviously have some sort of analytical framework for trying to make the best bets and assessment, but honestly, it is a numbers game, very much a numbers game. And then with time, there's definitely success bias, right? So the best firms get the best deal flow, attract the best entrepreneurs and all of stuff, right? But fundamentally, it's a numbers game. I think we are much more on the analytical side when it comes to, almost like a growth equity firm, being incredibly high conviction on every single opportunity that we invest in. And we might get that wrong, right? But we will be crunching the data and we will have our hypotheses and we will test them. And we will do tons of work to do that, which is very different from how most VC firms think about it. So we invest in a much smaller portfolio. So our first fund was only 8 companies. Our current second fund will probably be 12. And I think that's where we're going to be, 12, maximum 15 companies. We're not going to get to 30, 40. But we're doing that with a lens of getting, some sort of stable base case whereby we can realize 4 to 5x our money if this just goes really reasonably well per what we think. But always and critically doing that with a very substantial and real option for a breakout case where this thing just flies and returns venture style, top decile returns. And I think we've shown that in our first fund where we have, out of 8 companies, there's arguably at least 3 of them who've broken out on that, venture return profile.
How would you say this impacts your ability to take big bets, so to say? Because that's the typical critique of this model is that if you're not swinging for the fences, or if you're too concentrated, you can't swing for the fences on the things that will either go to 1,000 or go to 0. What is your take on that critique? I'm sure that many LPs have told you you're too concentrated, you're crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree with the critique. It's true. We're not going to swing for the fences on next generation, whatever, I can't even come up with an idea but the very crazy stuff, we're not going to swing for the fences on that in the early stages. We're just not going to do that. But I think we are proving, and we are very confident that we'll be able to continue to prove that there is a very particular strategy that we're pursuing, which is honestly reasonably differentiated and unique. There's not a whole lot of people do that. There's a lot of people who think about doing what we do almost like, I would say, micro cap growth equity. But they're not investing in those companies where there is substantial venture upside. They're not looking for world-class global potential, category leading potential. They're basically just looking for the steady returns of the 2 to 3 to 4 axis. That's not what we're looking for. But to be sure, we will miss out on some opportunities that could be generational companies, for sure. We will.
Yeah, and that's the trade-off that you make, right?
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit about then, maybe first of all, make it super clear to everyone, what's this ticket size and stage that you then prefer to go in at? I know I said that back when I did the introduction, but some may have forgotten. So I think be super clear there, and then tell us a bit about how you think about the reserves allocations that you're doing when you're pursuing the strategy.
Our philosophy is one where we have a fairly structured model in terms of how we think about building world-class leading software companies. And we think it's really, really important that you're optimizing for the right thing at the right point in time of the evolution of the company. So when you launch a product, it's all about finding product market fit. You should do everything to optimize for finding product market fit. There are way too many people who start thinking about long-term strategic stuff that only becomes relevant 5 years down the road, and trying to optimize for that in the beginning. You just don't know what is your use case, what's your ICP, what's your distribution channel, what's your core market. You have no idea, right? So optimize for the right thing at the right time. And for us, that means going for product market fit first. And we think about product market fit in a fairly structured, data-driven way. It is about growth, of course, but it's also about growth with a very specific ICP. So one type of customer, one type of use case, one type of product, right? Like not being all over the place. And we also think about it in terms of usage. How is that usage increasing, and how is it spreading, and how is it proliferating in an organization? We think about it in terms of retention. Are these customers within this ideal customer profile staying with your product? And we also think about it in terms of customer love. Are they attesting to the fact that your product is better and more differentiated for their needs than anything else out there? So being able to crunch data around those things, that is really core to us at the point of entry. That means the companies we invest in, they will have something like 24 to 48 months of operating history at least. So that already tells you that we won't be doing seed investments, right? We will invest anywhere at, like, say, late Series A to early Series B, there in between. Typically, this means, companies with 30, 40 to 50 employees, maybe up to 70, 80 employees. It means having an annual recurring revenue of maybe a couple of million euros up to 5, 6, 7 million euros. But that's not the sort of metric that we're looking for. We are religious about thinking about this customer, the product market fit phase of things. And that really is what's driving the type of companies we invest in. And then we go in, fund them with an initial check size of probably, we invest in rounds of, I'd say, 10 to 25 million euros, where we will do typically, 50 to 100% of that check.
50 to 100% of that check. How often do you lead? No, sorry, not lead, but actually take the full round?
It's rare that we wouldn't have at least insider participation. It is quite common that we wouldn't have a joint lead. But we do, honestly, I think we prefer to investing with a joint lead.
Yeah, you prefer to be the only lead, right?
No, so we want to be lead, but we're very happy to co-lead with a partner. Okay. And I think for many companies, it's just good to have a shareholder investor consortia that is stronger than one party, both in terms of dynamics, but also in terms of funding power and staying power and how you think about things.
When it comes to putting together the ideal round and the ideal investor consortium, where do you see that we could maybe do better?
I think, and this is not only companies, this is also on investors. And I think we're guilty of this as well, right? We're all searching for the great companies. Once we find them, we get a little greedy, right? So we want to keep as much as possible of that round if we've negotiated it in found terms. I think many times we have very clear examples of this, in our portfolio, where there's a number of other trusted colleagues, partners around the table. We've fared much better. Many companies, and it used to be obviously in 21 and 22, these B rounds or even A rounds were just getting ridiculously large, right? So getting way too much money too fast, you will need to try to drive a return on that, and you'll spend it on stupid stuff. And that makes no sense at all. We're not seeing that anymore. I mean, the amounts have come down, they've halved or even more. So I think that's under control now. Very rarely do we see a company raising too little money. At least, a company that is interesting to us with sort of global ambitions, they tend to, raise a substantial check. But the one thing is, I think many entrepreneurs would be better off thinking about the dynamics around the table rather than just getting one check. Because obviously it's easier, right? Just getting the check from me than getting it from me and someone else. But you could enter a discussion with someone like me and saying, I'd love to work with you guys, but who else would you bring to the table? We are very focused on expanding into the US market here. Would you bring a US local partner, for instance, right? You could think about that as an entrepreneur, and I think there's too little of that.
Take a start.
I know that you are of the view that we don't have too few early stage firms, and we don't have too few growth stage firms either in Europe. So I'd love to ask you about both those parts.
Yeah, I mean it's fairly obvious to me what happened over the last few years, right? There was a lot of successful startups in 2020, 2021, 22. A lot of those people made money, wanted to go from entrepreneurs to being investors. There were tons of funds started, and there was just a lot of money and firms into the system. So at the early stages, I think there's a massive oversupply, overestablishment of firms. The analogy that I always tell to people is when I got into venture in 2000, there were 200 firms that were listed with the Swedish Venture Capital Association as being active technology investors in venture in Sweden. They weren't all based there, but they were active there. There were 200. In 2003, there were less than 20. That was that shakeout. We are in the middle of this shakeout, and it's still protruding because people are trying to, save as much money as they can for a better day in the hope that things will turn around. I'm not going to put a number out there, but a large number of these particularly early stage seed firms with absolutely no differentiation, they're going to go out of business. So that's a pretty harsh comment, but that's my firm belief. Similarly, I think at the growth stage is what you're seeing now. We're seeing this obviously with some of these firms chasing our companies and seeing transactions that we just can't make any sense of. They raised such massive funds in 22. And they haven't deployed that because the market's been falling. Now they're desperate to deploy, and you have obviously an organization of people who are trying to make a career for themselves, so they have to deploy, and you have to be deploying in order to create a new fund. So the incentives are pushing the growth funds to deploy quite aggressively as well now. So I think you're going to see, unfortunately, disappointing returns from quite a few of those people as well, where there might be a shakeout.
Let's start in the early stage because there's so much to unpack. I think you said something interesting in the end where you said that we had so many coming to market with little to no differentiation. And I always find it super interesting to talk about, okay, so what is differentiation in venture? I'd love to ask you that question. When you say that there's too many with too little differentiation, what are you then saying that there's missing there?
I just think that they've got a similar proposition. They differentiation can come in so many different forms. It can come through access, through network, through knowledge, through expertise, through experience, through focus. There are just myriads of ways. There are just so many generalist, early stage seed, pre-seed seed funds out there competing for the same deals. And I just...
But can I ask you though on that question, because I absolutely agree that there's many, right? No doubt about it. There's also no doubt that our market grew incredibly. So there's also been that ramp up that you're describing. But then if you look at the number of funds or the volume of investment capital in the European venture ecosystem, vis-a-vis our the number of startups and the rounds happening, there's more capital per founder in the US than there is in Europe. So I'm always like, is it not just that there's a lot of new players in our market making someone like you feel like, fuck, what's this name? And then there's this one on Sifted, and I don't know, I can't keep a hang of this anymore.
Hey, I'm not competing with them. I'm not. So, it's interesting you say that because the numbers absolutely are, pointing in that direction. However, if you slice them by stage, we're at parity in terms of number of companies and population and GDP with the US at seed and even Series A in Europe. When you get to Series B and beyond, that's where that drops dramatically. So we're less than 40% of the capital in comparison to the US.
Yeah, and here you're talking about raised capital, right? So not round
capital available and invested into companies at that stage.
Yeah.
But hey, I might be an old fart, and I might be wrong about things. There might be so many opportunities in, I don't know, robotics, in virtual organic farming, in whatever type of sector that I'm not focused on. So there might be a massive availability for people to invest in that. The challenge I have, there's just so many seed funds who want to be investing into B2B software without having any sort of experience, track record, understanding, or particular knowledge about it. And I don't see the alpha. I just don't. And there are, to be clear, seed funds who do have that, who are really, really good at doing that.
So here comes my provocative take then. Because I don't think so. Looking from the numbers, that's what's making me think, well, I don't think that we have too much capital versus amounts of startups here, I don't think that's the problem, because that, then you'd have a bigger problem in the US, and I don't think you necessarily do. What I do think, however, is that you're absolutely right that we do have too many undifferentiated funds. I do think that we have too many going to perform lower than you would want them to, so they're not worth the risk, so to say, and they, as you also said, and I do think that I'm seeing, we're also LP investing as angels, right? And I'm seeing a lot of funds that I would never put my money with because of exactly what you said. The market is undifferentiated. They cannot give me a good reason why someone would pick them over Oxx or Seedcamp and in the end, the best founders will. It's so easy for the best founder to now reach out to the best firms in Europe. Like there's podcasts like ours, there's content platforms like ours that makes it perfectly clear who the leaders in the market are. So a great founder would have such an easy path to go there. So I absolutely agree that you need an incredible amount of differentiation to be a successful VC. I just don't think that it's from a numbers perspective. Like there's too much raised capital, too many funds necessarily.
No, and I mea culpa.
But I think that the capital lives with some of the wrong firms.
Yeah.
And I think that I know people that I have seen not being able to scale their firms as quick as they would maybe want to, or not be able to raise their first fund or second fund as successfully as they would have hoped. And then at the same time, I'm seeing 10 million and 15 million and so on in other funds. I'm like, how can this guy not be successful? And that's because oftentimes funds are raised on an LP network, not on a founder network.
Indeed. Yeah.
So that was our controversial take, part of this podcast that will.
I'll be very honest. I'm super optimistic on the European venture ecosystem. Absolutely. Overall. I just think like entrepreneurship is like, it's just exploding and it's becoming a choice for so many super talented people. There's more and more role models coming up, obviously with successful both, companies, founders and VCs. I am really bullish on Europe and, the venture ecosystem over the next 10, 20 years. I think we're going to be seeing some phenomenal companies out here. My big wish is that we're going to see companies as big on the B2B side of the house as we've seen on the consumer side of the house, right? We have world-leading companies produced on the consumer side. There hasn't been a lot of those on the B2B side, and that's obviously where we're hoping we'll be part of some of those.
Okay, now I want to go to something completely else, because I know one of your big passions is positioning and how startups can really build out a sustainable competitive advantage for themselves. I am the biggest fan of Michael Porter, so anyone that writes the word sustainable competitive advantage makes me happy. So tell me a bit about how you think about that and where you think that founders can really make a difference compared to others that
I think this goes back to when we were talking about that formative experience, like being an investor, like investing in things that are fundamentally sound and differentiated with a long-term sustainable advantage. Like that's always been the way I think about things. So positioning is obviously a way to clearly distinguish yourself in the market. Most software is, fairly generic. There's probably 10 companies that can do at least 10 companies that can do the same thing. How you think about positioning yourself against those companies and against the consumer needs or the customer needs out there is really critical if you want to build a big company. If you fail in doing this, you will be a jack of all trades, a master of none, and you will not be able to grow particularly fast or grow very big. So we think, as I said, we're religious on finding companies where we can find strong product market fit. We then try to help them build for what we think is go-to-market fit. The core tenet of that is this positioning. Who are you gonna, what product, for whom, through what channel, in what way, etc. Right? Doing these things really, really well and really be better than anyone else for someone, for some use case. Start there. And then you can proliferate and expand as you go along. But if you don't nail that down, it's really, really hard to grow a large and scalable company. And that's why we see so many, at least on the B2B side, companies in Europe, they get to 10 million ARR. They might even get to 20 or sometimes 30 million ARR, but then they fizzle out and they sell to private equity or, to a strategic. Building companies that get to 100 million ARR or even $1 billion of ARR, right? that's, you need to be really, really good at what you do then and serve a customer in a unique way.
Do you see the fallacies or the errors made by founders that end up fizzling out at 30 million ARR as an example? Do you see the errors having been made in the more formative stages, or is it at this growth stage where we're missing someone who knows how to take it from 30 and onwards?
Our very, very strong thesis, and I think we have some data to back this up, is that if you go from product market fit stage into maximizing growth and just trying to double down on growth, if you skip this, what we call go to market fit phase, where you're optimizing things for building that scalable go to market machine, it is really, really hard to grow sustainably into the hundreds and beyond of $1 million of ARR. So we think it's a formative experience that should take place, at the type of, stage where we invest. So these will be companies with a couple, 3, 4 million, 5 million of ARR, maybe 50 to 100 employees. If you want to compete globally, that is where you need to start to think about these things.
How do you diligence a company that you're looking at to, at this stage of 3 to 5 million, and you want to make sure that they're not making this error? We're not going down the path that will fizzle out at 30. What are the things that you look for there?
So we try to have an informed opinion about the market they're in and the different, vectors they could choose in terms of positioning. There could be, various different ways of doing that. And then it's about having a dialogue, because very few of these companies will have been thinking about this super strategically and won't have done too much work on it when we invest. So it's about having a dialogue with the founders and explaining how we think about building the company in this stage and seeing if we can create alignment. And if we can, usually it goes really, really well. But I wish I could say, yeah, we look for these 3, 4 things. If those are in place, we say yes, but it's not like that.
No, obviously. But there might be the opposite though. There might be some things. These are the things that we know. If this is the mindset, this is the route.
If there's a founder who is, you've seen these founders, like, and they're brilliant in their own sense, and they can build really good businesses, right? They hustle and they hustle and they hustle, but they don't have any other mode other than hustle mode. So they get momentum and they get traction, but they lack the sort of strategic point of view and vision and insight to see where are we going next. They're basically, they're course correcting as they go.
Yeah, it's pretty funny and quite provocative and counter VC mindset. 2 things that you've said, right? Because you just said here, hustle can be dangerous actually, because you get blinded to the strategic parts, and as a VC, investing and investing out from the proposition that what I'm looking for is hustle, that, while you can actually get down the wrong route by that. And then you also said that we have a tendency to skip the go-to-market fit stage, as you called it, and go directly from go-to-market and then just to scaling. And when you do that, which you could also definitely, if you simplify the VC model, so to say, or the blitz scaling model of building, and do that. And I think this comes back to then your critique of many VCs in your space, that there's maybe too many that don't have an in-depth hands-on operational experience in the space. And that's where you then fall prey to the fallacies of what you just read of cool content online, and you see hyperscale. Okay, then it's just about scaling, right? Wait a second. There's this thing in the middle that you really need to figure out.
I have a lot of friends who are really distinguished VCs, like traditional VC model, have done phenomenally well in that. There's a place and a role for that, no doubt. I think when you're trying to build B2B products that go into the core of a lot of businesses, you just need to understand what are their customer challenges. It's very different building a collaboration app that you can distribute, through a PLG approach to an individual, to an enterprise product that is supposed to drive return on investment for a very particular use case, it's just, you just need to, pick your poison, essentially, right? Like, you can do this, you can do that, but don't try to do everything.
It's pretty funny because I listened yesterday to Carlos's podcast, the Seedcam podcast, where he was talking to, it was part of their Startups in Focus series, where he was talking to one of their founders that's building in the AI space, AI security space. And when I listened to that podcast, I was like, this is good and bad content. Because it was so technical and it was so demanding on the listener that as just sit back and relax content, because I was trying to cook while I was listening to it, right? And I'm not a founder building it in any way. So for that reason, that was not easily accessible for me. So that's the bad part of it, right? But then there's the good part of it, which is this is exactly what you need if you're listening to a podcast that you're hoping to make you smarter. And that's exactly what we try and do with our podcast just for the VC space. So that's why, sometimes our conversations get a bit long-winded. But there's just this dynamic of, and the thing is, I think that many of the podcasts that are out there and the conversations that are publicly happening, they err towards the more interesting parts, but you then miss the nuances that you just described that are so integral. Yeah, so I just thought that was an interesting take, and I'm always thinking about why is it that venture is broken in a way? Because venture works incredibly well for the people that it works well for, but then the vast majority of VCs don't return what they need to return to be good investments for their LPs, right? So why is this part? And that's why I'm a bit obsessed about the fallacies of our industry. Any take on that? Do you think am I right in saying that's maybe part of where we have a problem?
I think, and this is going to make me again sound like an old fart, I think there are way too many people who make a living as VCs today. Most of those people don't have any idea what it means to really be an investor. And that's why I think a lot of them are going to disappear from the market. I know that's harsh and it's one man's opinion, but I do think there are people who have proven that the venture model can be phenomenally successful. I think there are people who have proven that the growth model can be phenomenally successful. We're trying to prove that something in the middle can be successful. But I think the core thing is you need to think like an investor, and you're not there to, it's been too much of a cool job for people. Like, yeah, I'm a VC. It's painful, and it's supposed to be painful, and you should invest your own money. You shouldn't just invest other people's money. So I think that's, we're going through that phase where we're clearing that out. But once we're through that, I'm very optimistic. And then I think some of this more shallow, perhaps reductive content that you're talking about, I think that's going to fizzle out as interest in being a VC wanes a little bit. There's too many people who want to be a VC. We don't need all these VCs. We don't need me, right? It's like, why do you want to be a VC? Yes, it's fun, right? But go do something real, right? Build product, do something.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's funny. I spoke to David the other day about, just from the content perspective again. 3 years ago, I think there were 6 other content creators in our space doing models of what we're doing. I think we're the only ones left still doing it. So it
must mean you're doing something right. That's good.
Well, no, I just think we had runway and dedication. We've had a lot of negative energy here between us. So let's go to a shout out, and let me ask you to tell me someone you'd love to send some love to instead.
Love is in the air, everywhere I look around.
There's lots of great people in our industry. I have the pleasure of working with or know them, through different means here. But yeah, and it's almost like, when people ask me, what's your favorite portfolio company? I always say, you don't choose between your kids, right? But obviously you have a favorite somewhere. One person that really deserves, a shout out.
Obviously you have a favorite son. Did you say that?
I have a favorite son because I only have one son, but I have a daughter as well.
I thought I'm gonna blackmail you with this clip.
Yeah, no, but if there's one person that I've been working closely with who I think deserves a shout out, and somebody from this industry, obviously, that would be Suranga at Boulderton, Suranga Chandratilake. He's a really good investor and partner as a co-investor. And he probably, thinks more in terms of the big bets and swing for the fences than I do, but we still find a very good rapport and way of understanding each other, and have done a couple of co-investments and would love to do more. He's a really good representative of the European venture ecosystem, I think.
We should bring him on the podcast someday. Now let's go to your 3 biggest learnings. We're on a hot streak here. Tell me, what are the most important things you've learned?
First of all, I think this thing about grit, persistence, patience, it just takes time, right? Like, yes, you can build companies in 3 years with great exits, but that's luck. That's nothing else. It's luck and timing, right? It's, if you want to build real foundational companies that matter, you need to have grit and hell-bent passion to build that great company. And nearly every company that I know of or have seen closely that are successful, they go through these phases, and sometimes there's a near-death experience, but that is just more formative and makes people even more determined and passionate about getting there in the end. So it takes time and patience. I think that's the first thing. Like, you don't get it. And similar thing, if you want to be a VC investor, honestly, it's very hard to evaluate a VC investor on anything less than a lifetime track record, because you can do great and you can be lucky and you can throw it all away. It's like you double down on red at the roulette and it's all gone. So you need time and patience. I think that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is, when I started in this business, I thought it was all about being the smartest guy, right? So sitting at the desk, thinking the deepest thoughts and being really strategic and smart. I'm probably at the completely other end of the spectrum today. And while I say that strategy matters and founders need strategic directions, people cures all ills. It's about people, getting the right people in the right place at the right time. Great people, they'll figure it out. Mediocre people, they'll kill any great opportunity. So I think that's a very distinct and clear learning experience.
Let me ask you about that. Mediocre people will kill any great opportunity. Any thoughts on hiring in the venture space? How do you make sure that you don't hire mediocrity into your firm?
Yeah, no, we have a policy of hiring from very diverse backgrounds. So, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with people with consulting and banking backgrounds. We have those as well. I had a consulting background myself a couple of years, like, God forbid. But, we've hired people, some people who are fresh out of university who are just damn smart. We've hired people who've ran marketing and sales organizations within SaaS companies. We've hired people who've been SaaS CFOs. We've hired people who've been SaaS COOs. Fundamentally, really smart people with diverse experiences. That's how we try to avoid that thing.
I asked because I had the other day a conversation with Patrick Hellerman from Fundamental, completely different space than you, so you probably don't know him or the firm. But we spoke about this dynamic between small firms and large firms and why returns don't scale and so on. And part of my philosophy is that there's something special about founders and there's something special about founding GPs. And yes, you can scale a firm. And what makes that scaling warranted is that you can also grow to service larger LPs, which means that you can take in more capital and then you can return more, not on a multiple basis, but on a dollars basis, more capital. But you have to do that by scaling the firm. And I think that there's a very finite resource of founding GP material in the world. And I think that once you go down the path of scaling a firm, it's just automatically going to dilute returns because there's just not these people around. Do you agree with that to some extent? Like, obviously we all leverage ourselves a little bit with, but it's just so damn hard to find people that are complete enigmas.
Yeah. No, I think you're definitely partially right.
I'm
I think there's
definitely partially right. Oh fuck, man! This is how
I
you
think
say when you have more than one son.
But there are arguments that speak against what you're saying. Look at Benchmark. Benchmark, probably the most preeminent venture firm in the world, right? Like they've gone through complete generational shift, still getting top quartile, if not decile returns and like LPs. But what they've done is they've stuck to a strategy and a size and just like, we're going to be, I don't know how many partners there are, 4, 5, 6 partners doing the same thing over and over again. On the B2B side, Emergence is Emergence Capital Partners, another fabulous example of people just sticking to their knitting, really consistent strategy, doing the same thing, but have been able to do that, succession in terms of generational shifts and stuff. So I think it's possible to do it. Then you have some of the other really big brand firms who become massive asset managers and like raising just more and more funds as the original founding team has sort of been leaving the building. I think it remains to be seen whether that works. It's a different model for sure.
I don't know Benchmark from the inside, but I have heard, I can't remember who told me, and I probably couldn't say his name either. But I remember the individual said, well, Benchmark, they always say that they're a small firm, but then they have a small partnership. And yes, it's generational and all this philosophy, but show up at their office, there's a bunch of people there. They just don't have, So, yeah.
But I think in terms of what you said about GP talent, there are firms who've proven that succession is possible.
Absolutely true. Yes, completely agree. So what I meant was the scaling of the firm, so like that you actually grow the staff force, and that's where I think it's just so difficult because you really...
I think this is probably more about religion than facts. The way I see it, and I think my religion is, or our religion, I should say, at all, because it's like we're going to build this firm sticking to what we know. We're not going to raise infinite funds. Yeah, we might raise a growth fund or an opportunities fund on the side, but like our core strategy is going to be our core strategy. Doesn't scale infinitely. That's the downside. We can't raise, and get rich on management fee.
Yeah.
But that's what we're going to do. So we're in that religion. Then there are people who have a different religion, and we all respect each other, right? But like, you choose. If you're a Christian, you go to church. If you're a Muslim, you go to the mosque, right? And I think that's how you should think about it.
Yeah, there might be some truth to that, and you'll be best at executing the thing that you believe in.
And now, the quick fire.
Now, let me ask you, and that's relevant when I ask you the question, your top tips for emerging VCs, because oftentimes it's stick to your knitting. Don't let anyone think that you need to be something else. But I'd love to hear, what would be your top tip for emerging VCs that are fundraising?
My first tip for an emerging VC is don't become a VC. It's make sure, go build product, go sell stuff, go market stuff, go learn all of that stuff. So that would be the first advice if they haven't done that. If they've done that, I would say, okay, if you want to go into this line of business, think very long and hard about what is your differentiation. What is your unique alpha? Why are you better at doing something for someone that will help you deliver outsized returns to your LPs? Because ultimately, that's what this business is about. Don't think that VC is a continuous dance on roses, and most of the job is pretty boring and it's difficult, and then you get the odd celebration, right? So it's be prepared for be long term in the mindset. Don't think it's a quick fix. So differentiation, think about your alpha and differentiation. Make sure you're committed to being persistent and staying the course.
Now I want to ask you something counterintuitive that you've learned since you've been in venture. What has to you just been baffling?
I don't know if this is counterintuitive. It might be like, the first thing people will say about venture is like, yeah, it's an apprentice business. You need to develop pattern recognition, right? And I think that's absolutely true. If you've read Daniel Kahneman, you know everything about thinking fast and slow. I'm a devotee of that, right? I really, really believe that's how we function as human beings. And I have the same biases and flaws as everyone else, right? You do succumb to pattern recognition because the brain is always looking for shortcuts and for patterns in order to explain a situation. Now, that works really, really well in 99% of all situations that you apply that approach. But, there's definitely a situation where that will be your worst enemy, in the sense that you don't see what's different, right? You're trying to attack a situation, you're trying to frame it, and you're using all these heuristics and experience and gut feel and pattern recognition, but you're missing out on something because you don't have a receptor for that signal. And I think I've seen that, I'm sure I've seen it with myself, if I was really going to sort of think about, but I see that in some people who've been really successful, who sort of they think about life. It's almost like if you've done math, it's a vector space, and it's only defined by these vectors that, built up their success. And if there's a different vector, they just don't understand how to think about that.
Yeah, I think that's very
that I think is slightly counterintuitive.
No, but the counterintuitive thing is that you would think that from success you can derive a good decision heuristic, but the fact is that in venture, oftentimes that's the last thing you want to do, because if you've seen, what everyone said, right? PayPal would, no one would ever do PayPal if you'd done fintech before, because you'd say it cannot be done. And that is very true. And
That's a great example.
Mikael, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was fun. To everyone who have tuned in, there's a bunch of notes that Mikael has been so kind to put into this, and I was jumping around in our script. So there's a ton that you can go in on EUVC and read the show notes here from Mikael if you want a bit more structured conversation than what we had here.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. These are the types of conversations I enjoy. This is, why you want to be a VC, having conversations like this, bouncing stuff around and speaking about, things high and low.
Exactly. Thanks so much, Mikael.
Great stuff. Thanks very much.
Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. This episode comes to you by the support of our partners, Portfolio IQ by Synaptic. Portfolio IQ is the most effective way to track your portfolio. It pulls data from all sources, board decks, financials, MIS sheets, forms, emails, everything, and creates a true single source of truth for your portfolio data. With Portfolio IQ, you can track all the metrics that matter, not just the standard metrics. All metrics are reviewed by a team of certified accountants. You'll get 100% accuracy. Not sure about a number? Just click on it to see the exact cell in the document it came from. Portfolio IQ also adds a layer of standardization to make the data comparable and useful for benchmarking, valuations, and reporting. All of this is as simple as forwarding an email. Zero added work for your fund or your portfolio companies. Portfolio monitoring that you'll fall in love with. Go to synaptic.com/portfolio IQ. That's synaptic.com/portfolio IQ. The good folks at Synaptic will be happy to give you a no-cost trial.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
United and determined, we can serve as a model for other regions of the world.
The nature of a problem requires a European response.
Europe is a story of new beginnings. New beginnings.
Let's start acting.